Is Darius Steward. He's an American artist from East Cleveland, Ohio. He grew up in East Cleveland, and he's very big in education and community building. He completed his undergrad at the Cleveland Institute of Art in 2008 and did a Master of Fine Arts at the University of Delaware in 2010. Symbolically and literally, he addresses cultural and social societal conflicts and open conversation across racial, socioeconomic, gender, and cultural lines. He's quite busy. He also teaches at St. Ignatius High School. He's an art instructor there. I think he's done some workshops at various colleges around the Cleveland area as well. And he also serves as the program manager for the Cleveland Museum of Art in their education department for currently under curation type events. So he's big in teaching youth. He is an exquisite portrait artist who spends a lot of time documenting and painting his family over the years. While many of us might measure the height of our kids over time on a door jamb, he paints his kids over time and documents it that way. So that's a great passion. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Darius, and he's going to do actually a portrait today. I think he works pretty fast, so we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, let's see how this goes. I've done things similar to this before, and I do work pretty fast. A reason why is because I'm kind of I like to think of myself as more of a reactionary painter. So what I do is I make a ton of mistakes and I react based off of them. Yep. And I keep going back and forth until I get something that I like. So I know for the most part, when y'all do these things, because I was at one of them before, y'all kind of work with everybody kind of just writing their messages in the chat, things of that sort. I'm free to talk and answer any questions as I go. So if anyone wants to, reach out, if it's okay with the captain of the ship here, I'm okay with answering any questions. So let me explain to you how I'm operating here. What I do is I have my board on a slight tilt. My angle allows the water to kind of drop down. So what I like to do is I like to put the water, put the paint a little bit where I wanted to. I'm kind of thinking ahead of time. So I will put paint in one area where I think it's wet at and let it seep down and run into the next area. So I undershoot a lot to ensure that it doesn't leak and run too much into the subject. But the whole time, I'm just being conscious of the water. So my goal is to let the water work for me as much as I can. So that is my whole objective, How much can the water do the painting and how much do I have to interact with it? I know that sounds crazy, but, I like to try to work as smart as I can and not as hard as I can. So my whole process is, if the water is going to move, can it move in my favor? As far as how I approach painting figures, again, it's reactionary. I always keep a brush that I have a tendency to use if I get some spots of color that I don't want it to be. I have a little dry brush that I use that I just, I kind of soap up that area, or I keep tons of napkins around. My wife's a couponer, so we always got tons of napkins, and that works perfect for me. So I don't have to feel as wasteful. But as you can see, I'm letting all the colors kind of work together as of right now. And I'm just adding my paint to where I think it needs to go as I'm going. Now, part of the process with this is you always got to be leery, a little cautious of how you letting your colors mix in. Like, not losing any of the whites. That's one of the crucial things about painting. Tons of people got all these different methods, how they keep their whites. You can go back and look at the old masters, and a lot of times they will scrape whites back into the canvas. White back into the pieces. You got other people that have a tendency to, try to map everything out first. Me, I just like to try to keep it as white as I can in the areas. I just try my best not to touch those areas. Everything else that I feel like is a color, though, I throw paint in there willingly, and I try to see what's going to happen.
So Darius, we have a question,
Question.
regarding the pigments you're using for flesh tones. Right now, you're working on a portrait of your daughter. You've got some flesh tones in the forehead area.
Yep.
What sort of colors are you using there?
What I got right now, so what I use is assortment of different, the primary colors, and I use an assortment of them. So I got Pyro Red. One of my favorites is Olympian Crimson, of course. Another color I tend to use a lot is, in here I have, what is this? A cadmium red, a cadmium yellow, a Naples yellow, what is this? Another lemon yellow. I also have the cobalt, the ultramarine, and the cerulean blue. So, and then I think I got this is a green that starts with a P. I'm losing the actual term of it right now, but I can grab the color real quick and see exactly what it is. But I tend to just, like I say, I overshoot my colors a lot. So, and that's kind of another challenge for me. I'm an artist that loves the challenge. So when I was contacted by art to do this, it was kind of like, part of my challenge was can I actually paint in front of you guys? I definitely didn't want to have a video showing past paintings and talking through those. I didn't want to do that. And I feel like what would be the fun in that? So
Darius, your head is getting in the way a little bit. So you're going to have to try to paint sideways.
Let me know where I'm at any time.
Oh, you're good here.
Yeah, I can make some adjustments. So right now I'm just trying to build, and while it's still wet, I want to make sure I keep pushing those colors down. So if I keep the paper wet, the longer I keep it wet, the more I can kind of add the stuff that I need to add as I'm going. So in here in the eye area, I don't want to get too crazy just yet. I want to make sure I know where I'm at. I always go with a variety of colors in the hair. And I have a tendency to do more, like when I'm doing faster paced things, a little more wet on wet first. And I work my way up. The bows and the stuff that's in our hair, I usually bring up as I'm going. Just to kind of help me get the rest of the stuff done with the hair first. So I have a whole area over here. I have to start the wet. Now that's the beauty. So, okay. So one of the reasons why I use the sticker paper, and this is a good point here, is when I use the thicker paper, somebody's trying to get in.
Oh, thank you. I got it.
One of the reasons why I use the thicker paper is because it allows me to kind of reactivate areas as well. So if I feel like I'm like going too far and haven't really got a chance to work on an area yet that I feel like I needed to make sure I put in, I can always just go with water and build that area back. Over here is a nice shadow. So I'm going to pump a dark color in right now. As you can see, I'm kind of expressive with my colors. Somehow they end up feeling realistic towards the end, but I really don't start that way. I really start pretty loose with my color choices. Also, like in here, I pull some of that color back out. Now this is a dry brush. This is a dry brush that I'm just using to kind of smudge some stuff together. Now I have this whole side of the face over here that's relatively lighter that I can add a lot more color into it, and I can feel pretty confident in that. This is not that difficult over here, so I just drop some color in and start pushing it around. Anytime if you got any questions, I'm more than open to answer. So one of the things I also like to do as I'm painting is I like to try to think a few steps ahead. So I'm often kind of looking at where's my next move? What's my next play? So the whole time I'm making this marks, because I feel like it's a pretty simple area, I'm looking at my nose area, trying to figure out, okay, how do I want to use this space? And I just want to just dump a color in there. Just dump a color in there real quick, just so I can get that started. I know another thing y'all probably would want to know about is studio spaces. Where do I work? The lady that I was had the privilege of sitting in on the conversation the last time when you guys had this, she had a nice space that was kind of secluded from, it looked like the world.
Oh, that was Ev Hales, yeah.
Yeah, and the whole time she was talking, I kept thinking, that can never be my life. I'm surrounded by tons of stuff all the time. My kids are always in my life and always around. Like I hear my wife talking to my kids right now as I'm doing this. I'm what I call a nomad in terms of my art practice and where I work at. I work anywhere I can get a flat surface that I can paint on. Anywhere. So I am not picky. I will work anywhere possible, as long as I get the job done.
Darius, I have a question from Linda.
Yep.
She's wondering, how did you decide to focus on watercolor as a medium rather than a different medium?
It was the very first, thanks for that question. It was the very first thing I learned how to use. So when I was in high school, this was the very first paint that came to me from my teacher, which was named Andrew Hamlet. He always told us, like, you know, if you want to be a painter, first thing you got to learn how to do is use watercolor, and you work up from there. So it's this idea of watercolor first, then from watercolor you go on to acrylics, and then oils. I knew I was a painter. The moment I made my first mark with a brush in ninth grade, I knew I was going to be a painter. Once I started to look at painting, and when I got to college, hearing the conversations around it, made me more than happy to be a part of that. And it was like a goal for me, is to be mentioned around my peers. But I did notice something the whole time I was in high school looking at this stuff. And when I was in college looking at this stuff, I noticed that watercolor was often talked about as like a preliminary medium. It's like you do this before you move on to the oil painting. So when they show Sargent's watercolors, they show like, oh, and in his leisure time, he did these watercolor paintings. And they made it seem like it wasn't a big deal at all, For me, I wanted to, that's a challenge for me, is trying to figure out how to bridge that gap, right? So I look at watercolor as like this territory that's, it's charted, tons. But in terms of conversation, it has this like its area where it kind of lives at. And a lot of people out there still don't look at it as a medium that is, in my opinion, a medium that is worthy enough to be in contemporary galleries alongside of oil paintings and mixed media art, right? So for me, the challenge was, can I put it in that category? Can I make work that can function in museums and galleries and stuff alongside of some of my contemporaries, some of my peers and some of the people I look up to that are not doing watercolor. So I kind of fell on it because I really thought it was room to grow. Also, oil painting has it has so much baggage to it that I don't really care for. I don't feel like it was a place for me in the oil painting world. I feel like it has all this weight, it has all this baggage, has a ton of things already going on in it. And I feel like it didn't need me. Right? It has all these artists already doing stuff in it. And I want to be someone that kind of sets his own path. I don't want to just follow in footsteps of many prior to this. But I still want to be in the conversation. So I decided to stick with watercolor out of that very reason. But watercolor was something that I strayed away from a while because I was noticing the conversation, and me being a history, loving history in college, I always looked up to those conversations that kind of talked about these artists and how they were doing all these big, huge things. And it always seemed like oil painting was at the forefront. So for the longest time, that's what I thought I was going to do. And somewhere it just clicked that, watercolor was natural to me, easy. I loved it, all those good things. And I would do it for nothing. So I figure, why not use this as a thing? So I hope what I'm doing so far is making sense.
Yep.
I talk so much about that I haven't put a lot of pain in some of these other areas quite yet. So
I think we can really see how you're building layers on this.
good. Yeah, I'm trying to work a slightly different way right now because I don't have the luxury of waiting on areas to dry and thinking about it. And so I'm just trying to slowly and kind of methodically, but pull paint around.
Mm-hmm.
so I could get where I needed to be. So like in this area here, I'm darkening this because I know I'm about to go over it next with a whole bunch of water in that area with a lighter blue to kind of activate more of that blue over there. I kind of went more of a purplish route. So I'm being aware of that too, and I'm gonna make some adjustments to that as I go.
Yeah, I think with her shirt being kind of a purpley blue,
Yep.
I think that color tone reflects onto her face.
Exactly. So, so I take the photos, I kind of, to talk about that, I try my best to command everything about the image that I'm using, So I take the photos, and that's partially why I like to paint my daughter, and because I want to have complete control over what it is I'm painting. So with that being said, I'm always kind of looking at those color changes and those color choices, and I'm making decisions as that go. But I am always conscious that I don't need to keep it that way. So I put that blue and pumped all that color in on that side. And now that I'm looking at it, I'm realizing that some things can shift and change. So I'm okay with making those changes. All right, so this area over here can have some more blue in it too. And we can use this, let that move a little bit. While that's moving, I will go in with another color over here. I do like I say, I try to, I'm an interesting painter because I know a lot of times watercolors are like very planned out, very organized. And I think for the most part, I have a plan, and I'm pretty organized as I go. But I do have a tendency to let that room for growth happen. I know I'm still relatively young in this art world, and especially in painting. I mean, I've been probably painting professionally for about 10 years. So I know I still got a lot more room to grow. So a lot of this is personal challenges too, how much paint do I, colors do I need? So I try to simplify my palette as much as I can. I often look at YouTube videos, or I look at different artists out there, and I try to see ways that they operate, and I utilize some of those same techniques in my own works. So I'm constantly looking to grow, because I know I got room for that.
There's a comment here for you from Lynn. She
Yep.
says, I'm enjoying the way you lay in unexpected colors and let the eye do the blending.
Yep. I thank you for that. I'm not a person that needs to overwork anything. And I realize that most viewers aren't as lazy as people want to believe, Like, the audience wants to have some investigation. They want to be able to take a part of it. They want to feel like they're a part of the action. So a lot of the times for me, I need to let some of that room for the painting to grow, and let you feel like you're a part of that process. if I go in here and I get 100%, you know, exact, which if people see my paintings, they do look pretty convincing at times. I don't typically think of them that way though. I typically loosely paint. And over the process of doing it, things come together. And I think sometimes the eye actually helps a lot with that that process. So I'm trying to keep my head out the way, but I gotta step in here a little bit. Drying my brush because I'm starting to enter in some territory where I want to make sure I keep a little bit of light. So some of the keys, if people are wondering any of the things I'm doing, if it is looking kind of foreign or weird, some of the keys to this for me, like I said, making sure I'm paying attention to the water, the flow of the water, how is it holding up, where is it still dry at. I don't like to cover up an area until I feel certain that I don't need to go back to the white. I don't particularly like to chop into the painting that much. So I'm always looking at that moment, trying to see when is enough. But I'm also kind of looking at moments where I can kind of just lay a color in and just let it work and move around and do its thing.
So Darius, we have a question from Lynn, two questions actually. One is, are your kids artists? Do they have a passion for art that now that they see you doing this? And what do they think about being your models for your artwork?
Well, my daughter really loves it. She's 4, so she thinks it's the best thing to sit and take pictures for me and be in all these places. She actually enjoys it and likes to brag about it a little bit. My son, he's 9 now. I've been painting him since he was hours old, Yep. So he's over it. He can kind of care less right now. I tell him one day where you're with your significant other and you're driving around Cleveland and you see pictures of yourself everywhere, then maybe you appreciate it a little bit more. You have some bragging things and stuff like that. Because he's kind of all over the city right now. He's kind of recognizable to people because I do a lot of murals and public art too. So I think he has a different type of feel for it. And as far as them being artists, my son hasn't really picked up on being an artist yet. My daughter's 4 and she likes to paint everything with me. So she's constantly wanting to be involved in everything. And, I also think she's left-handed. She just seems naturally like she's invested and interested in that process. More than my son is. My son, he likes to be around, he likes to see it, but I think it's ran its course with him a little bit.
How old is he, Darius?
He's 9.
Okay.
Yeah, he's 9. So for him, it's, as of right now, he's at a stage where the dreaded video game
Yeah.
has taken over all consciousness. That's what he's into right now. My daughter, not yet. So she's very interested in what I do. And usually she would be sitting right here with me if I was painting on my own. Like I say, I like to stay in my house and work because of those moments though.
Now you talked, I know on your website, your murals are mentioned there. We just lost your video, Darius.
Oh, how did that happen? That's weird. Let's see.
There we go.
We're back. Can you see the whole thing?
Yep,
All right.
that's great. Would you talk a little bit about what murals you've done, where they are in Cleveland, what the content might be, and are these community murals? Do you do them all yourself?
I mostly every one of them that I've done thus far has been on my own. I've tried to incorporate others in little ways, but for the most part, they have been all solo projects. I have them, for example, it's a big street in here in Cleveland on Euclid Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
So Euclid is a big street, goes all the way across Cleveland. And I've done mural that's on the bridge over there. I have some utility boxes on Euclid. I've also did murals. I have a mural project right now that's coinciding some sculpture. So I'm actually getting into sculpture too. So I have some sculptures in the mural that's going to be together downtown in the public library and in the garden out there at our Cleveland Public Library. I've also did murals in college campuses, Tri-C, that's the name one. I've did murals inside of museums for like, for a moment of time. So the mural process, well, I work fast. Scaling up is not an issue for me. Working with a crowd hasn't been an issue for me. So murals just seem to naturally work in my favor, I can go to murals easily because it's just, it's part of the practice. And again, I also like the challenge. So I'm scared of heights, but I'm even more afraid of having a piece that stinks. So I'll get up there and I'll paint if I got to make sure I get the job done right. So that's kind of my whole approach to murals is like, and the public out, the public work is always near and dear to me because I feel like it's a place where people that are not museum bodies and, they don't go interact in all these spaces all the time. I feel like those people can get something out of my work too. Maybe they don't feel comfortable in the spaces that is usually shown. But if it's in their neighborhood on the wall, then maybe that message can be received,
Right.
So I really want to make sure that, that conversation is happening.
And what medium do you do for your murals?
What medium?
Yeah.
House paint, air spray can.
Okay.
Whatever works on the wall.
Right.
I did for the mural that I did in the museum. It was tempera paint that I used, which I didn't know how that was going to work, but it ended up being one of my best murals. For me, painting's painting. My same moods and my same way of working kind of happens to be the same every time, no matter what. The same way I'm working here is the same way I approach a mural. So when I'm painting with spray cans, I might have 2 or 3 in one hand, and I'm just switching color to color and putting marks down.
Let's see who this is. Laney is asking, is the paper still wet where you're adding the darker colors?
right now.
Yeah,
A little bit, but not really. Some of this areas is kind of drier, and I'm just throwing color on top of it now because I realize I've been in the face a lot, and I want to make sure I pull some colors back down.
so you just kind of go back in and re-wet.
Yeah, the re-wet
Okay.
areas. This is how you get some of those other areas to kind of stay lighter too. You know, and for me, it's like I said, I'm a reactionary person. So while I'm trying to decide how I want to approach the next part I need to approach, which is the lips, I figure why waste that time thinking about it. I know I got to do stuff up here, so I just go back up to that other area and I start laying other stuff in. What you're seeing me right now do is I sometimes drop a huge color spot, or I overdo the color in an area. I work really good under pressure, so I have a tendency to purposely go a little farther than I need to sometimes, just to see if I can will it in and get what I want out of it. I know it's kind of weird and sometimes counterproductive, but I do see that there's some more color in this area. It's like a little intensity there, right there, somewhere in here. So I keep wanting to place it in there. So I'm placing it down to see how it's reacting. And then now that I wet that area, I will fan it around a little bit.
Okay.
As far as the lips. So one of the colors that I didn't mention that I use more than I thought I ever would is a color called Opera Pink. For some reason, one of the hardest colors for me to ever make is the lips, the colors of the lips. Because sometimes I feel like I go too far to the red, and I often feel like that color just doesn't quite do it. So I end up going with Opera Pink a little bit. They kind of still give me that reddish tone, but to add a little bit more fleshier color to it. Because for some reason, my natural instinct is to pump way too much red in there. So that brings on another good subject. When you're painting, and this is my personal opinion, you got to know your own tendencies. Part of the issue that I think a lot of painters deal with is they're battling themselves for the most part. I think most of the time we're battling ourselves. We got a certain idea of what we want the painting to look like in our eyes, or we have this special grandiose idea of what this should become, or we are fighting to get this one particular color right, or we have all these other things that goes on. And me, I know I have it just like the next person. So what I try to do is I try to think them out. And I know, like, oh, when I get to this area, I might overdo this, so maybe I should tone it down in my mind. I spent a lot of time after my shows kind of sitting around and looking at the works and kind of making judgments based on where things should have changed at, where I could have added something, where I should have subtracted something. And I ask myself pretty basic questions in those moments. So I'm always looking to improve, like I said earlier. So my natural instinct is to look, be honest with myself, figure out for the next time, how do I need to approach this? So when I get back to doing the next piece, I can make a better adjustment. I'm sorry if I'm shaking a little bit, that the camera got hit.
And Darius, we're seeing some kind of a viewfinder or
I see
crop.
that. Why is it still there? That's great. Because y'all want to see a
It
viewfinder.
comes and goes, kind of.
Yeah. Let me see. Can I get rid of it? I don't know why it's there. It shouldn't be there. I'm scared if I change it, it's going to change too much. Yep. So now it's manual focus. I'm using my camera for this, so that's why it's kind of. Yep, and it's still there anyway.
Yeah, it's not really blocking anything, so
Good. This
Don't
right
worry
now,
about it.
I got to go in the settings to kind of get rid of it. So I hope it's
yeah.
not bothering you guys. And I know have to be leery about the time as well. I don't mind you all staying with me all night, but I know you don't want to. know you got other things to do.
Linda has another question for you. She's wondering if you studied drawing models to become such a good detail painter.
Yes. So I used to live in I pretty much lived in the figure drawing rooms in my college. Actually, I started drawing the figure, and this is a funny story. I actually thought I was going to be like this illustrator, this huge comic book artist, or something like that. Like I thought I was going to draw like Batman and stuff for a living. But I realized that I sucked. I was so bad at drawing the bodies. So what I started to do was I started to learn how to draw the actual figures by going to figure drawing classes, because I figured that if I want to actually get good at drawing the body and making it up, I got to at least learn it the real way. And I ended up going there and meeting some people and started falling in love with the school. And that was actually why I went to Cleveland Institute of Art, because I started to really love the surroundings, and I got to know some people there, and they started letting me go for free because it was like a $10 every time you go, like a $10 a session. So I started to build up on that, and next thing you know, I got a lot better at it. But yes, and honestly, figure drawing is something that you don't ever get good at, and at least in your mind. If you feel like you're great at it, you probably need to figure out some other way to challenge yourself. Me, I never quite feel like I'm 100% there yet. So that's kind of what keeps me kind of active in that field and keeps me trying to be as good as I can at it. Because it is something that's a little challenging to kind of get. See, now it's saying it's going to reactivate, and it didn't go away. Yeah, everything wants to go wrong technology-wise right now. And believe it or not, I tried this like 3 times earlier today, and it was working just fine. Okay, so now I need to put a lot of that other color on the other side in. So what I like to do is I like to use my new gumbosh and a little bit of my raw sienna, Italian raw sienna, and a tad bit on my quinacridone. I never could pronounce the word right. That's another thing. When I'm mixing paint, and I don't know if y'all noticed this, I'm totally just reacting to whatever's happening. So if I put this color in and I look at it, I'm like, oh crap, I took it too far. What I do is I go in there, I just tone it down with the natural color that I think. Now, of course, I have some things that I hold true to. Like I know a little bit about color, enough to know that you want to always make sure you're kind of looking and paying attention to your complementary colors. So I'm always focused on that. So like, for example, if I feel like this color over here is too dark or is too green, I will instantly go and start dumping some red over in the area to kind of break that up. Because I know it'll desaturate that color and it'll get me closer to what I'm thinking. So I'm just keeping some basic principles in my mind, so to speak. Now, this part where I'm at right now is my happy zone. I feel like I got colors where I need them to be for the most part. I feel like I understand where the face is working and where it's not working at. So now this is the time where I can start to really go in here and start to get my smaller brushes out and start to apply some detail. Because if you notice, I've really been just using like these two main brushes. And that's another thing. I noticed people had these fancy brushes and they got all these special tricks and all these neat things they could do with it. Maybe I'm just not experienced enough, but I don't have any of that. I just use whatever feels comfortable and fits the best. I do try to use the biggest brush possible at first. So I try to use for every space I'm covering, quite possibly the biggest brush I can use. So that is a purposeful move on my part. And I gradually work to my other Princeton brushes. But other than that,
Caitlin is asking, was the quinacridone that you used, was that a gold or you had the
quinacridone? It's a you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go get those paints for you guys so I can show you. Let that sit for 1 second. I'll show you exactly what I'm using.
Okay.
It's all Daniel Smith. And it's all like my go-to colors. So I'll show you most of them right now as that's moving a little bit. So you got Pyro Red. Of course, my Cobalt Blue.
Yep.
So when I'm painting with those yellows, I got Naples Yellow. Naples Yellow usually give you like more of a good skin tone. It kind of helps. Yellow Ochre, of course. It's some colors that I feel like is staples with self-portraits, with portraits at all. New Gambosh, or however you pronounce it. I never know. Camboge, I never know. I'm not good with pronouncing. I just look at the color and I know that's what I like. And this is my Hansa Yellow. So those are usually my yellows, crimson, my red, quinacridone rose.
Okay.
So that's the color I usually use. And my opera pink, my beautiful opera pink.
Okay.
So those are like my main henchmen, I should say. Those are my main henchmen that I do all my dirty work with. If I need something special or something specific, like I have a Perling green, which helps me get grays pretty good. So that's why I use it. When I was using a lot of Winsor Newton, I used to use the Pans gray and stuff like that. But I started realizing that green is extremely helpful in getting some of the effects that I like. So now I moved to a smaller brush. To my Raphael brushes now. When I go Raphael, the majority of my Raphael brushes are more like brights or flats, which is, for people that don't know what that means, it's just like my square tip brushes. And this just helps me kind of bring out a little dry brushing to bring out a few effects, things that I feel like I might want to actually include that I may have lost for one reason or the next.
So Darius, I have a question. This is Art. Do you ever lift paint after the paper is dried? I mean, obviously you're lifting paint when it's wet, but
Yes, I lift some when it's dry a little bit. But again, a lot of the times when I do that, it's two reasons why I usually do that. One is I messed up really bad somewhere, and I'm trying to find a way to make it so it looks like it was intentional, or make it look like it was, you know, part of the grand scheme of it. Or I have this idea of what I want it to look like, and I feel like by lifting it up, it will change the feeling of that texture or the paper at that point. So I do lift up, but that's also after I sat with the work for a little bit. And you know, like right now, I'm all reaction mode right now. I don't have a chance to kind of think about lifting or anything of that sort.
Yep.
But in my slower pace paintings, I would probably look at this and say, okay, now I can pull this area a little bit to kind of get the effects. Like in here, it's some pulling that may happen to kind of get some of those blues back to where I want it to be. And I'm noticing on the camera that some of these colors aren't nearly as strong. But that's kind of part of my process. I'm again, like I say, a lot of my motivation to how I paint has a lot to do with the moment at hand and how it and what I wanted to say. So I've had paintings where all the color is pretty faint. I've had paintings where I'm dumping so many bright colors on there, it just looks like this face is pretty much half and half, like bright red on one side and you know, blue on the other side. And
yep.
I'm not paying attention to any conventions. Like it's literally for me all up to what the subject is telling me to do and what my concept is driving. I try to keep that in my mind first so I don't get so caught up in the technical, because technical can be a crutch. You know, having that ability can be a crutch sometimes. I had a teacher that always kind of talked about my facility. He used that word and I hated it so much because, you know, part of the word facility is because it's easy, right? And I always didn't want it to feel like it was easy. And my argument was, maybe I'm making it look simple. But maybe it's a lot more difficult than it is. So I'm always trying to not lean on my crutch. The fact that I'm actually kind of just have a natural knack for some of these, you know, I have a knack for some of these things. I know I've been doing figures, like, you know, that was literally the only thing I've been interested in since I started working. Now I have other subject matter, but figures is like my what I love. You know, if I love anything to paint, it's definitely figures.
So we have a question from Karen.
Yep.
The question is, how do you choose a design or position for your subject?
So it all comes up with an idea. So in these particular pieces, like this one right here, this piece is a lot to do with a series of works I got called In Search of New Beginnings. So flashlight is a thing that I use a lot in these works. So for me, it was, I have this painting, I have this drawing, and like 3 other drawings that all is kind of centered around my daughter kind of going around with this flashlight, kind of using it, trying to figure out what it does and how it functions, and trying to help lead the way. So for me, this was one pose in a series of like 3. And I think I'm also always looking at the idea of many images to kind of tell a story. I like this idea of narrative. And I grew up loving like the Wrath of Medusa and Guernica and all these big history paintings. But I don't know how much that exists anymore. So for me, it's, can I tell a long-winded story? Like I must be like kind of like Quentin Tarantino in terms of how much dialogue I have. But you know, I've been really big on trying to tell a story. And so every image I have is like 1 of 3 or 1 of 4. And I'm really kind of picking up on moments within that that series. So this is just like one of those moments where she was fooling around with that flashlight. But for the most part, all my work stems from these different ideas I had. My kids, it's kind of, my son for the longest was like me, you know, like I used him as he was me. Like if he would be a stand-in for me. So I feel like most of the pieces I did of him, especially earlier, were more like self-portraits. You know, so with that being said, it's kind of, I used to think of moments as a kid that I seen in him overlapping me, or vice versa. I feel like I grew up way too fast. So I often used him as like my way of kind of going back to that childhood, but also a way to talk about progress and to talk about what can be. So I like the idea of using youth in general for those reasons. So I just look at these different moments, and I also look at what's happening in the world. So I have a piece that that is my daughter playing Operation. And you know, with COVID and what was happening, and with all the speculation about is the you know, the vaccine safe and all these things, it was kind of like this idea of my daughter playing with people's lives, right? So she's literally working with this you know, this object, this game. And I was, you know, and I was referring to that as like the game I was seeing unfold in the media and unfold around, you know, this people not wanting to take the vaccine, people wanting to take the vaccine, people that were losing their lives, you know. So I use her to kind of start that conversation. But, you know, it's also about something else that's happening in the world. So I'm kind of I let things fester for a while, and then I eventually get to them. And when I get to them, I try to make sure that what I'm doing is meaningful and relevant for its time.
So which artists in your studies do you really admire, either masters or contemporary artists that over the years that you've seen their work?
One of the people that I always looked at, And this is somebody I always go back to. I mean, always. Sargent, John Singer Sargent.
Yep.
I constantly look at his work because he makes me mad. Because he made it look so simple. Like I could imagine him painting with like a long cigarette in his mouth, or the cigarette with the stick to hold it, and he's standing like, you know, a foot away from the canvas, and he's just kind of making marks, and then a masterpiece happens. And that level of confidence, like when I look at his work, I almost feel like he was so good that he had to be arrogant. You know, like I make up all these ideas of what type of person he was in my mind. And I look at the economy of the brushes for him, how economic he was with, you know, how can I say it? How he was very choosy with how he applied his marks. It doesn't feel like any mark was half-baked or lackadaisical or not carefully considered before placing. Almost everything seemed to have a purpose. So he got moments where it looks like he can use a whole broom to paint an area, but then he has another moment where, you know, it looks like he has so much control over how he approaches these things that it kind of amazes me. So he's one of them. I looked at the Andrew Wyeth a little bit back some time ago. Jerome Whitkin was another artist I looked at a lot. As far as, you know, contemporaries, people that I like now a lot. I look at a lot of Titus Campar. Kerry James Marshall is a good guy, a good person I like to look at. And all these artists, a lot of them may not even be relevant to what my process is or what the world it is I do. I just simply like some of their contributions and what they do in their particular field as well. So I like the fact that Kerry James Marshall throughout his career has had one idea or one main idea or main focus, and he's used all these different ways of approaching and telling a story about what he was trying to talk about. And he didn't let any success or the previous works or anything dictate how he proceeded with his next works. So I really like him for that. Titus Campar, I like how he's pushing some of the conversation when it comes to what's going on with Blacks today, and some of the marks that he has to make, and you know, some of the strides that he's taken in his community that he's in, starting his new building up, and you know, so I look at them as a whole, and I try to look at their whole career. When I look at artists that I'm admiring for how they paint, a lot of the times I'm going to artists that are masters, because watercolor is something that I don't quite see a lot in contemporary works, at least the ones that I'm usually looking at. Like, so when I look at Kehinde Wiley or somebody like that, none of them are showing watercolor paintings. But I still like the conversation and some of the things they're having. When I look at watercolor paintings, I don't always like the conversation that's around it or the way their approach. I often feel like, you know, those scenes where people are outside and they're painting this dusty, like rainy day scene. I do understand it's skill involved, and I do understand, like the Alvaro Castanet, I think that's his name, and those guys. I do really think they have a lot of talent and they have a lot of skill. It's just the subject matter is not something I'm interested in.
They're, well, like Herman Bickel and Alvaro, they're more into landscapes or urbanscapes, I think.
Yeah, they were definitely into urbanscapes. And you know, I'm not into that. So I look at it for the technique. I look at it to see how they approach certain things. And I also do admire how they let, I think one of the comments that was mentioned today is about letting the eye kind of do a lot of the work.
Yep.
Alvaro and those guys, they let the eye do a lot of work. And I do like that about their approaches. So I do look at them a lot for that reason. But as far as subject matter, I kind of go all over the place to get people that may, you know, kind of relate to some of the subjects I'm involved in. Now, with the hair, I usually do her hair in stages because she has all these nice lights. So if I do pull up anything, a lot of times I like to pull up the strands of her hair because I think the texture is easier completed with like waiting on it to dry a little bit and doing some dry brush and then using some techniques to kind of pull some of the colors out. So I do often do that. So I make suggestions in her hair at the beginning. And usually throughout the process, I bring other elements out. Any other questions? Anybody curious about anything that I'm doing as I'm doing this now? I know you've been with me for a while now, and I hope I haven't made any of you go to sleep with boredom yet.
Well, nobody has left, so holding our attention.
So I do, this is Art again. I have another question.
Sure.
So do you ever work on several paintings at the same time?
Oh yes. Oh
Okay.
yes. So yes, I do.
Can you talk about the challenges and the pluses with that kind of approach?
Pluses is okay. So I was always taught, and maybe this is a long-winded answer, but I was always taught that the better I can get at seeing, the easier everything will come to me, right? So for me, my teacher said this to me, and I never forget because I thought he was crazy. And he said, the trick is in seeing everything as if you're seeing it for the first time. Think about yourself as if you're like that baby, that newborn baby before anybody ever taught you anything, right? And you're just looking at everything for the first time. If you can do that, then he said, you know, you'll be able to draw a lot and you'll be able to have great ease over every subject you kind of face because you're not getting boggled down with what you got in your brain. You're drawing based on what you believe that's, you know, what you see. And because I do realism and, you know, I do things that I'm looking at, it's always good to keep my eyes fresh. So looking at multiple subjects and kind of working over time is kind of an easy way of kind of keeping that practice going and keeping me not getting so comfortable with what I think I know. Because I think, like I say, most of the struggle is in working and painting is kind of doing what you think exists versus what's really happening. If you can, you know, kind of focus on what's happening, then doing what you think exists is a lot easier, you know? And you get kind of boggled down by that a lot. So for me, I simply work on multiple things as a way to kind of keep things fresh for myself. I hope that makes sense. That was a lot, but Some of the pros to that is, like I say, it keeps things fresh, makes me feel like I'm constantly challenging myself. New images bring different problems. And, I'm always looking to find ways to have solutions to those problems. So, for me, that makes complete sense. One of the downsides to that is you at times you can feel I've been in moments where I've been pretty much overwhelmed because I feel like I'm doing so much at one time, and sometimes I feel like I don't get to the paintings enough. Or, I got to keep a log of which ones I need to do and which ones I need to put on my list next. I see my camera went out again.
Yep.
All right, so let's see. Here it goes.
There you go.
All right, so here we go. So, for me, it's kind of making sure I keep a lookout on what's actually happening and keep inventory, because sometimes I can get caught up in different things. And also you momentum sometimes shifts. So I might feel really good about an image one day, and then after a week, I go back and look at it, and all of a sudden I don't like it again. All right, so what time are we at now? 9:23.
Yep.
It looked like my computer's about to die. How are we thinking so far? Is it making sense what I'm doing here?
Yes, it is.
Everybody that's looking at it, this is how I build it up. So this is the whole process in a nutshell. I usually will keep going across this. I'm indicating a little bit of what's happening in the hair pieces right now, but for the most part, it usually will shift. And I will start to go in with little brushes at this point and start building up some of those details that's in there. But if I touch it, it's at a place now where it's starting to draw really good, and I will wait a little longer so that when I go in there and start pulling some stuff out, I will have some room to operate. Any questions about any of these things?
I think right now what's happening is we're not seeing you in speaker view. So I'm not sure why that is.
I see it's like a still image.
There we go. There we go. Yep.
All right, so it's a still image, but there you go. So, like I said, at this point, it's just the build up. I probably have to clean my brushes. That's another thing. I clean my brushes quite frequently. So I will go at this point, I will clean my brushes. I will clean part of my palette. I will clean my water. And then I'll go back at it. Just go back at laying this stuff in. And the same way I approach the face, kind of working, as you don't get to see this, but I'm not working flat. I'm working at an incline. So I'm letting the water kind of pull down. And as it's pulling down, I'm pulling that pool that I put at the top. I don't know if y'all noticed at the very beginning, I wet the top part of this because I want the water to kind of slowly fall. And as it's falling, I'm pulling it around and using it. And I think for me looking at this now in the camera, it does look like a pretty decent start. The colors are where they're at. I got some effects going on. It's some things that I can pull out. It's some moments like in here, that little spot. I want to have a little bit of lights in between there, and it feels like it's closing in. So I would do some different stuff. As a matter of fact, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit more so you can see that. So it's some little spots in here that I definitely would kind of go and renegotiate. And what I usually do with that is I have this Raphael square brush, like more of a bright. And what I do is I go in with a little bit of water on it and kind of fudge that area. Just kind of rubbing those bristles across that space. You see how I'm starting to lighten that up?
Yep.
So this is what I started to do in these areas where I feel like, okay, I went a little crazy in that area. Let me go and refine it. This is the beauty of the better quality paper too. You'll notice when you have thinner paper or 140 pound press paper like that, it gives you problems in some of these moments. You won't be able to pull colors up as easy. And if you're like me and you're working at a whim and you're constantly making adjustments and you constantly feel like you're making mistakes and you're trying to go back and forth with what's happening, you quickly start to realize that you need to invest in better quality stuff so that you can make those mistakes with some confidence. Because I can't live without my mistakes. I need them because that's the way I feel good. When I see that white piece of paper, I am intimidated. And usually my first layers, my first colors, my first marks are good, at least to me. So my drawing, I feel like my foundation is pretty strong. So for me, it's like, it's all going to go downhill from here. So I'm literally like, let's make a mistake. And from that mistake, I learn and I react. And that's my whole process. I learn and react. Every time I make a mistake, I react. I make a mistake, I react. Oh, I see a question pop up in the bottom. Do I typically add a background? No. That's the other added pressure. A lot of portrait artists, they have water that they can push around the background. They can push it around the foreground. They can let it merge and blend in. The white of the paper has been a huge subject part for me in creating my work. It's been a huge part of what I do. So the white of the paper is just something I have to keep. And I'm always conscious of that. How do I make this work and make this function for myself while still keeping that white of that paper? And to be honest, sometimes I wish I didn't have those things I like the white of the paper. But I realized that it makes my subject pop. It does something special to the way I like to paint. It makes the focus on the composition. And I usually try to make it so the white of the paper becomes part of the subject. So that's kind of my approach to that. So no, I do not usually have paper, the white of the paper covered. That's usually always there.
Darius, Barb is wondering if you could show us your palette now so we can see how you mixed colors.
Yeah, here. So, oh, wow, I got some pen on my table. Here you go. So this is my palette. As you can see, junky, right? What in the world is he doing? I don't know. Like I say, it's all reaction. So if I'm painting this, I'm looking at this, and I'm saying, okay, I see some different colors happening here, but I want to pump a little bit more blue back in there. So what I'm doing is I'm just getting the space, throwing that blue on there, and then I start to apply. Now that's a relatively drier mark, and I don't know if I like it. So the first thing I do is I go in with water and start to pull that around some. But like everything I do is just, it's all right here in this messy palette. Yeah, there we go. Just building up. So at this point, I probably need to give it a second
All right, well, what we can do now is we can open it up and ask people if they would like to unmute and ask you some questions themselves rather than just doing it in the chat. Is there, are you able to let us see you on camera, or do you only have the one that will show your artwork?
No, I have another camera set up. So
Okay, because we'd love to, for this part, we'd love to be able to
of course.
talk face to face, I guess.
Let's see. Share my screen. Advanced. All right. So you see me? Hello.
Hi, Darius. All right, so at this point, if anyone has a question, just unmute and start to ask your question. If someone else is talking at the same time, just we'll figure it out and just have one person at a time. So
I couldn't tell if you were going into a water with your brush in between picking up paint or not.
Was I? Yes. So when I overshoot sometimes, so sometimes I overdo it, so I'll drop a pile of water. I mean, a pile of paint that's really dark and aggressive, or really like too vibrant of a color, you know. So like I'll use red sometimes right off the palette instead of mixing it with anything else. So what I usually do when I do that, I'm setting that up because that one area I want to be bright, but I'm also going to use water to kind of break.
okay, we locked up. We'll see if he comes back. I think, I'm not sure if I'm not sure if we'll be able to get him back or not.
I hear you.
There he is. Okay, now we got you.
All right. Do you hear me?
Yep.
All right. I don't know what's happening.
No, me either.
The good thing is it didn't happen during the painting process as much. All right. So that's a good thing. All right. So what I was saying was what I'm doing is I place a strong color down first. So like I'll place a blue strong, a strong, very, very vibrant blue. That's why I like the Daniel Smith. So I place that color down and then I go back with water and I kind of use that to kind of make it more of a gradual transparent color or a transparent glaze over the next color that I put or the previous color. So a lot of the times I am adding more and more as I go of water. And sometimes after I make a color marker too, I might go and just grab straight water and put it down. I'm constantly looking at, and you can't, that's part of the thing you don't see in this, is you don't see my movements from side to side and back and forth, trying to look at where the paper, the sheen is going away or where the water is shifting. I'm always doing that. So I know exactly where in the world the water is making this next move. Because like I say, I want to work with the water. I want me and the water to be friends, you know? You know, in my world, me and my waters, you know, we having a beer together and we're enjoying the time. So I want to make sure that me and the water gets along. And that happens a lot. I've seen people work in a part of dry and they can't get that spot back. And they wasn't paying attention enough and then it dried up on them and now they're like, what do I do? Now they got to scrape it out, or they got to, you know, add more colors over there to kind of get rid of what previously happened somehow. I always kind of keep track of the water, so I can never have those huge mistakes happen to me. But they still happen, right? They still happen. So it's how do you react to it? That's kind of always what I'm looking at. It's how do I react? When I do plein air painting, stuff like that, that's pretty much all I'm thinking about. Is, oh, I make a huge wash. Oh, the water did this. Let me go with that. You know, it's moving down in this way. Maybe that can become part of this building that I'm putting in, or, you know. So it's all reaction. With doing portraits and doing figures, people are a little more cautious when these mistakes occur, right? You want to control it all, so everyone's always a little timid with the water, and they're really controlling the crap out of the painting. I don't. I think of a few things. I think of the shifting of values. So sometimes I paint a painting in the color, but I'm looking at a black and white image because I want to make sure my values match up. So I'm always thinking of values. I'm always thinking of my complementary colors. And I'm always thinking of the very few things you got to know, like, you know, how is the structure of a face work? If this area feels darker, then it will look like it's an eye. If this area feels lighter, then, you know, maybe this is the forehead part. You know, so for me, I'm just thinking of form. I'm thinking of the basics. And that's why I said I need to stop, because at this point, I get into the weeds of the detail, because I've done everything. The colors is pretty much there. The overall look and feel that I'm going for is there. Now it's trying to make sure those hair barrettes and bows is perfect, and all those little touchy things that make people think, wow, he did a good job.
So when you're teaching your students, do you think that learning to use the water correctly is probably the most important thing for them to learn?
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. It is very hard to gauge what in the world the water is going to do. If I make a puddle here, I've seen kids try to fight with putting more and more pigment down, because the water is, you know, when the water dries, it's lighter, you know. I've seen people hold that napkin so tight in their hands because every time they make a mark, they're blotting up most of it because they think it's too wet, right? I ain't got to the point that I can feel it in my brush. Like, that's just a little too much water, you know? So you're bringing it out on the edge of the cup, you know, or whatever you're using. So, and I think that's experience, and that's also just really looking and looking and looking. So when you see some of these artists painting these watercolor things and it seems like it's effortlessly, you know, done, it's because they just have a long-standing relationship with how this works. And that's what I try to explain to the students is I make it look easy at times, but it's not. It's just the experience level and the level of focus that I have when I'm doing it that allows me to do it this way. So I think for them, one thing is also the colors. I use colors that's very unconventional. So sometimes my examples are like maybe far out there, you know. I'll paint a red apple and I'm starting it green, and they're like, "Why are you doing that?" For a high school student, that's like blasphemous. You have to use red. It's a red apple.
Yeah.
You know, the moment you stray away from that, you're like doing something wrong. So I do a lot of these things, and I think a lot of times like even today, I'm throwing blue straight out, you know, straight across half the side of the face, and I'm adding some colors to parts that doesn't make any sense. I also think of it as transparency, you know, like if I'm layering all these different colors on top of each other, eventually I get the tones I want, but I still get the realistic colors and the feel of the skin because it's a bunch of transparent layers and we got all these colors there.
Mhm.
So I see a cool area and I think blue. I don't care what the color feel like. Most of the time I see it, it feels cool to me. I'm going with blues right off the bat.
Mhm.
I'll make the difference up as I go if I feel like it's too much.
And what's your favorite dark to use for your final putting in those darks?
So sometimes I use an indigo. When I go really dark, like if I want to go really dark blue, I bring an indigo in and I'll kind of go with a crimson, and then I'll go with that green if I want it to feel kind of black. So
Mhm.
what I do is I mix it purple to a kind of reddish, and then I throw the green in there to counteract the reddish color.
Okay,
What starts to happen after I go back and forth is I start to get these grays and I start to get these nice darks.
so
That's why I like that green. Like I usually mix all my colors, but that green somehow just does that for me.
that perylene green.
Yeah, that perylene green just does it for me.
What color did you use for the darkest darks on her hair?
So that first color I think I was doing cobalt blue, and then I went in with a little bit of that green with the cobalt blue and the darker part. I mean, the cooler parts.
Okay,
In the warmer parts, it was a little bit of crimson and a little bit of burnt umber mixed with a little bit of the blue.
okay.
Yeah, but I love hair for that because it's like it's a thing that picks up a lot of color.
Yep.
But I get to kind of go wild. So sometimes I think I overdo it. I get to go wild with it though. So I do love when it's time to use some colors in the hair.
Okay, Lynn has a question to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Darius.
Hey, Lynn.
I love what you're saying about you being a reactionary painter. Like you put down a mark, and then you're like figuring out what to do with it next. And I'm wondering if, the way you talk about it, I wonder if you like doing abstracts at all because of that. I mean, it seems like that's sort of like the way I do abstracts is I put down something and then I like respond to it, and it's sort of intuitive. And
Well, abstracts, I've done them a lot. And I have a bunch of work that I like do with spray paint, and I do with acrylic paints and stuff that I throw a bunch of paint around and I get to have fun with that. I don't think I've became good enough visually where I know how to say no. Like, like I think with abstraction, it's this line that you got to toe and knowing when and where to pull the trigger and when to say no. And I feel like I get caught up in having fun to the point that I just go too far. I don't have that discipline to restrain it.
yeah, totally.
With a portrait, I kind of can see it.
Yeah.
And it looks at me and it's like, oh, you need to stop now. So I'll pump the brakes.
And I wonder how much of it has to do for you too, as an artist with, you mentioned like the importance of content for you. And I know abstraction has a sort of content, but it's a different kind too. So I don't know how you feel about abstracts in general, as opposed to landscapes and cityscapes.
That's a definite other reason for it. I feel like through the figure, it's relatable to the human body. People can see it. People understand it. Every person in here has a moment or a memory as a kid. Maybe you had a moment on a swing, or maybe you had a moment when you had to carry book bags, or you had bags at all, or like I'm trying to tap into some of those human emotional things that you went through and those emotional gut responses to these moments, and to utilize children and to utilize them in a certain way. I feel like a lot of people can relate with that in an emotional way. So when I couple that with actual things that's happening in the world, events or, you know, my take on stuff that's actually going on, I feel like it resonates a little bit more. And it gives people an opportunity to kind of think about this and you know, kind of go off and have that dialogue with themselves, with nobody else.
Right.
So
Yeah.
for me, that does it for me. Abstraction has that same potential. I mean, you think about Rothko's and stuff, right? I mean,
Love Rothko.
people have gut emotional responses looking at those color field paintings, right?
Yeah.
So it can happen, but it's more of a secular feeling and approach, where I think mines are like more poignant to certain key things that's occurring. And I think I need certain, but with that being said, I am a minimalist at heart. So like the backgrounds is not there because one, I don't see the purpose, you know. The moment I place this person in a space, then that's a specific space. I want to erase that specificity. I want it to be everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, you know? So when I did do backgrounds, it was usually like a green screen or like this painting behind me. That's the Louvre that I took over, and I put all my paintings up on the wall, and life is where, you know, the famous Da Vinci painting is on the pedestal, and, you know, it was to talk specifically about that history in that space.
Yeah.
But I've gotten away from that because I feel like if you look at my pieces as a timeline, like you can literally see my son at 1. And the stuff that I was saying at his ages at 1 has grown and changed. And it's a storyline. And I feel like that with the little pieces that I add is enough. Once I start throwing in like, oh, he's in this street, he's in this area, he's around that, then I feel like it's too specific and that cuts a whole bunch of people out of the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something for me to think about. Thank you.
No problem. No problem. Yeah, I want people to feel like they can enter into it, you know? And the more people I can get to be a part of the conversation, the better.
Yeah.
So that's what it is all about for me.
In a way, you're sort of taking, with your background approach, maybe this is the wrong word to use, but you're sort of abstracting the figure from a specific place and time.
Yes. Yes. That's exactly what it is. You know, so I am stripping a lot of the spaces. I'm stripping a lot of the, you know, the current moment out of it, but I'm making it, you know, I'm making some of it talk about current things. So it's kind of a weird mix. And I got my website pulled up here. How many, I don't know how many of you actually looked at some of my work, but I can show some of it too. Deidre, I look like you was about to say something, Deirdre.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we did provide links to our members to look at the website, but you know, I'm not sure how many did, but I would strongly encourage people to do that.
Yeah, I'm talking about specific things. I thought about it. I'm like, maybe I can show certain parts that,
Sure.
you know, that really is relevant to me. So I'm gonna try to share my screen real quick with you all.
If the technology will work, we'll go for it.
You see it?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. So let's get through it. So for example, like this piece here, it's called Honey, I'm Going Places. It's part of this of painting. This is my daughter on this little she used to always had this little car, like this little Barbie van, I think it was, that she used to always sit on and drive around on. And I thought it was hilarious because she was way too big to be on this thing. I think at one point one of the tires even came off on the back. But I often thought about it like that idea of progress, right? So this truck was in a number of pieces of mine that kind of talked about this idea of traveling and progress and you know, trying to get somewhere, and that potential to grow and that potential to change. So that's like that. So my pieces have a tendency to to kind of work with specific, ideas or thoughts that I have. So I'm just going to scroll through some of these. These are some of the UPO pieces. That's regular watercolor paper again. But as you can see, these are all like moments. So this is like on 300-pound, I want to say this was twin rocker paper, but it was a try to blur out things and kind of focus on this moment, this little one section, right?
Yes.
Where it's like this togetherness, but at the same time, this, kind of this back and forth. So it's that tension and that pull, right?
The struggle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there goes little prints that I did of it. So I did a series of prints. So I do prints from time to time to kind of showcase what I'm, a little bit of my line drawing and a little bit of my other, backing, my other strong suits. Because I do consider myself quite a draftsman, and I like to keep those skills sharp. And printmaking is like every line is crucial. So it really makes me feel like if I mess a line up, everyone will see it. But like as you can see here, the negative space is extremely important for me. So if you cut this and crop this, it has not the same feeling at all. For me, again, with me being a draftsman, I'm also considering composition all the time. So the pieces that are the most successful are there because of the composition and how I'm able to pull on those areas. But like I also leave a lot of areas of white in the face. So there's a lot of breathing room here. Mm-hmm. And this is what I mean by like just dumping a bunch of color on. So you could see in areas like whole marks that's just there, and I just let them puddle up.
Mm-hmm. You capture such intense emotions, Darius.
Thank you.
I noticed, I felt as you were painting the portrait tonight, that with each new color you added, I was feeling a different emotion in her face.
Thank you. Thank you. That's when I know I'm done. So when I said, oh, let me stop for a second, it's because something's happening. Mm-hmm. I gotta hold that moment.
Well, it seems like you also actually are able to transmit their aura back right onto paper. That's what I saw as you were painting.
That's why people got to be close to me. I've painted plenty of people before. I've had commissions when I had to, I pay other families, other members of other people's families. And I try to, in the interactions with them, kind of figure out things about them or discover things so the image will come a little easier to me. But I know my daughter like the back of my hand. Mm-hmm. And it's nothing like that. It's nothing like that. I almost feel like I get her right even when I'm wrong. Like even when I make something wrong, I feel like it's going to look like her. Mm-hmm. I don't have that confidence when I get to everyone's face. My son, I know his face as good as I know my own because I've literally painted him. I have my first drawing of him. He was in an incubator, fresh out of his mother, probably like an hour away. Right? So I've been drawing him and painting him ever since. So he literally can use all my paintings as like, moments of his time. He's like, oh, this is when I was 3 and this is when I was 4. I've done that so many times with him.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really different.
Yeah. So that's, again, my way of showing some of the aggressive marks and drawings and, things I do on that sort. So pen and ink. Then I do this, which is on UFO, light. Dad taught me to be brave. I made sure I put that in there. But like these moments, so you can look at some of the hair pieces and it's just a shape. And like little splotches of paint that I let sit. But then I got other areas that I really kind of go in and give you a little bit more. But if you look at this, UPO is unique because it doesn't let you fuss around a lot.
Yep.
You know, you make 2-3 marks in the same spot, chances are you're pulling up the paper, that color.
Right. Yep.
So I love it because it makes me think a lot more about Sargent and those people that I felt like made the first mark and it was just perfect.
Mhm.
Yes, that's beautiful.
Thank you. And when I feel like I can do it, when it's right, it's right. When it's wrong, it's like, oh crap.
Yeah.
Like, so this is a watercolor version of the other one.
How do you plan to pass these on to your children? Are you creating books for them or any way to memorialize all these wonderful paintings?
I think they're going to have books of these. They're also like, as of right now, I just found out I was talking to Thomas French, one of my dealer and good friend. And he told me how many museums I was in. And he told me I'm in 21 museums right now.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And I was kind of astonished by that number. I didn't realize we made that many strides in these few years. But I kept thinking about it, like at some point I want to try to take a tour, you know, and go and see all these places and be able to take photos in front of the works and get to show them how much I've really cared about chronicling their development and how far I took it. Because I lost a lot of pictures of myself as a kid in a flood. So a lot of my works was in the base. I mean, a lot of my works as an artist and a lot of my pictures of me growing up that my mom kept all got damaged in the flood. So I don't have a lot of my childhood visible for me. So for me, it was like, what better way to make sure their childhood is cemented than to put it in museums where I know we'll try to keep it forever.
Wonderful.
So for me, that's really all it's like that. That's the goal, is like they will have stuff everywhere of them. You know, they will forever be able to go and look on a website or be able to go somewhere and they could pull up these specific moments, you know, that they might remember very, very vividly in a different way than I do, you know. There's a lot of UPO pieces.
Darius, I'm going to ask a question, and if it's uncomfortable for me to ask it sometimes, but you let me know. As an artist of color, you represent your culture as well as yourself. And I'm wondering where you see art being representative of people of color at this point.
I think it's at a pretty unique phase right now. I'm seeing a huge movement of artists of color, queer artists of color that's doing a lot of collaging and a lot of building up with multiple found materials and things of that sort. And I'm seeing that as a movement. I'm seeing Kende Wiley put that big statue and to kind of go and to kind of sit and rival some of those historic statues that's been up for years of Confederate soldiers. I'm seeing it's a lot of work being created now.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's kind of this really exciting moment where I feel like, and I hate to say it, but some of the silver lining with all these events that take, all these horrible events that's taking place, like these tragic moments like George Floyd or, here it was, Tamir Rice, like, we had so many people that's being killed for no reason or, for little to no reason. It's a lot of these things are not even able to be explained really. But because of these, some of the silver lining is people are looking. People are actively searching for the stuff. and people are trying to find a way to learn a little bit about this. You know, learn a little bit about who we are as people, you know, and they want to see our comments. They want to see how we feel, and they want to see what we have to say.
Yeah.
So it's this unique moment where now people will look at this work and they will think about that. You know, they will think about these moments and they will put it into different contexts than they probably would have years past. So I really love this moment for that. And that's kind of what I'm looking for as an artist all the time. But also that's why content has to matter. Because for me, I can't simply just paint because that's what I like to do. Like, yeah, I can do it. Yeah, no one probably will judge me for it, but I feel like I have more of an obligation. So I have to push that forward. And the way I can do that is by being honest, being true to myself, and making work that I feel like is relevant to me. That's why my kids is in it. That's why, you know, I'm talking about this growth and development and this, you know, this idea of when you see a book bag, I'm thinking about baggage that we all carry with us. How does that look if we physically carried our baggage around? You know, and I call it baggage claim. You know, I'm doing all these things to kind of hint to these specific moments. Because that's very relevant to me, and I feel like it fits perfectly in the moment.
Yeah.
I feel like we have a lot of voices that we haven't heard very loudly and in the creative arts of all kinds that I think we're beginning to hear, and it will benefit all of us.
Yes, I do. I agree. Just to show y'all a little moment here. A lot of people, like I said, I'm a reactionary person. So I don't know if you see like the scumbling and the breaking up of the paint.
Oh yeah.
This happens a lot when you have like some type of resist or something on the Yupo paper.
Yeah.
I seen that my hands was oily. So I was putting colors down and it was beating up.
Yeah.
So I started to use it to kind of help to create that effect. I have a tendency to just go with what's happening. And that was one of those moments where I really was happy in it because it was starting to do some things that I didn't anticipate. But I started noticing that, and then I started pushing it a lot more. It's areas that things are just moving. And because I like to challenge myself, I was working on a lot of these Yupo papers standing straight up. So you're working with watercolor on a plastic surface, things are going to run.
Yeah, right.
So for me, it's, can I control it? How much can I control it? What type of effect does that give me? That portrait, that face she had was perfect for that idea. So it's like, okay, let me let this run and let me kind of work into it to see what I can pull out of it.
Wow.
This is my, like, you know, the way of going half and half with the color. And this is Yupo. These are all Yupo right here.
Darius, how do you, this is sort of a technical question, but when you work on Yupo, do you always display it under glass, or how can you protect it from getting wrecked?
You can spray it. So you can like spray fix it.
Okay.
I usually did like clear, what I do, like clear acrylic coating of some sort, like in a spray. I've done that, but I also, I mean, most of them, by the time I show them off to anybody, they're in frames.
Under glass.
Under
protected.
glass in most cases by that time. Because they don't never quite, you know,
Seal, right?
And if they do, I haven't figured that out yet.
Okay, yeah.
In my museum job, I had some of the, it was a really great guy that worked with contemporary artwork and conservation that used to kind of give me hints and things that I could possibly do to buy some time. But he told me every piece is going to die eventually. So all we're doing is trying to delay the inevitable. So how much
Yeah.
are you going to worry about that versus just
Right.
put out the work?
Right.
Every once in a while, I do have a person call me and they do say, "Hey, my work has been messed up. What do I do?" And I fix it for them sometimes.
Yeah.
But you can see the difference in the level of paint. So like this is like bright.
Yeah.
And then this
Yeah.
is like really light.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of these sign pieces as well.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Your work is spectacular,
Thank you.
really.
Thank you.
Yes. Beautiful.
Well, I think we should ask, does anyone else have a question now? We'll wrap
I
it
don't
up.
have a question, but I have a comment.
Yes.
I am so inspired by you and your work. It's just amazing to me. And what else really caught my attention was when you were painting, you were engaged with several people talking at the same time, and yet you managed to keep the paint going.
Yeah.
And that's something I can't do. And so, but I think you're wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
I think as a teacher, I've developed it over time. We have a few things that we do here called a monster drawing rally, and you draw in front of a crowd for like an hour and a half, and then people that's in the crowd get to bid on your piece,
Mhm.
and they get to buy your piece, and it goes for a good cause. So I've done that a lot too. So I've been trying to work on the speed, and it works for me because I'm a reaction person. So in that pressure, I'm a person that if I need something due, like if I have a deadline, sometimes I wait till like a day or two before it's time. And it's not because of procrastination. It's not because I'm lazy. I feel like some of my best work is going to happen if I wait longer.
Mhm.
So I think it's just natural for me to be able to do that. Like I remember when I was first talking about this, Art was like, "You do pretty detailed portraits. Are you going to be able to do a demonstration in front of a group?" And I was like, I think I can do it. I wasn't sure. And this piece was a little complex, but I think it ended up being closer to what I thought far as the face. I didn't get to the hands and everything, but I think the main ideas are there. You kind of see how I approach it. Yeah. So I think I'm okay with working like that. And a lot of these pieces you're seeing was like one day. So a lot of the UPO is literally a day of work. That's also why I work on many pieces at once. Because while I'm waiting on something to dry over in this area of the painting, I can go to the other drawing and start layering colors in there. UPO, like I say, you can't blow dry UPO and stuff like that. It doesn't work. So you just gotta let it dry. Yeah, so that's a lot of the works. And I'm trying to see if it's anything. Yeah, so some of these works at the beginning you didn't see. But yeah, I got quite a few pieces in here. And it's just kind of to show you a little bit of what I do in terms of paper. We do have tons of murals and all that other stuff, but I don't know if it really lives on my website as much. But we got to do something about that. I got to check.
Yeah, if we searched your name and the murals are mostly in Cleveland.
Yes, the murals are mostly in Cleveland, so you will definitely see the murals.
Okay, so we could do a search in Google I'd like to take a look at some of those. We had a lot of interest here in Minneapolis, St. Paul for public art.
Good.
In the last year since George Floyd. And there's a pretty active community preserving the public art that was created around that time.
Well, yeah, I do a ton of that stuff. And it's videos on me like working in the process. It's, it's all type of stuff out there with me doing those type of, doing mural works. And I think it's kind of amazing because, you think of watercolor, a lot of times it's like this little smaller, intimate thing. And like I said, it's this whole idea of it being like this preliminary sketch or this start to another image. So I think people didn't think that I can work in mural form. I don't think that was the natural thought that they had when they looked at my work originally. That like he works in realism and he's doing these watercolors and none of those things apply in murals. So how does he do it? And but I do work fast. I do think I'm a draftsman, and I have painted with a lot of different materials. So it was easy for me to kind of scale up. And I think once I started doing that, and they seen the first one and the second one, and it was like, oh, now it's every year I have 1 or 2 murals that I have to do somewhere. And now the next thing is, can I do sculptures? So I'm actually doing sculptures as well. So I have a series of sculptures of my kids.
Oh, wow.
Always something new. Well, Darius, thank you so much for sharing your talent and your thoughts with us. It's been a really enjoyable evening. Art, do you have anything you want to say?
No, I think this has been really great. You are extremely talented. I looked at the Suma Health mural online. That's really impressive.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. I see
Look at
right
that.
there. Yeah, that's the whole size of, yeah.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Yeah. So that one's actually, Caitlin, that's actually on a, that was what they ended up putting on like nylon fabric and they had it against the gate. That was over, I think it was 200 yards long.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was a pretty serious mural. It was that was on Euclid. That was like going down towards downtown Euclid. Yeah.
Wow.
And now those pieces live on utility boxes all over Euclid. Wow. So we cut sections off and kind of wrap the boxes with them.
Wow.